I matched with a murderer on Tinder. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. All of this happened 2 years ago, and if you are on a dating app, please be careful. I matched with this really cute guy on Tinder. He said he was a doctor, and he had all of these pictures to back it up. So I completely believed him when he said he was an oncologist. I was 22 at the time, and I realized that we did have a big age gap. You see, he was 36. Talked on Tinder for a couple of days, and then we moved over to text message. And he was so charming. He was reciting poetry to me. We even discussed the movie Pride and Prejudice. Looking back now, he asked me all of my favorite things. And from there, he started talking to me about my favorite movies, my favorite actors, favorite foods. I mean, he even sent me recipes. He was perfectly charming in every single way. Finally asked me out on a date, and we went to a beautiful, expensive dinner. The restaurant was right by a river. Then he surprised me with the boat ride on the river. Date was magical, almost too good to be true. Then things just got really strange. He was texting me nonstop for 2 days, asking me how I was, literally asking me what I ate for dinner, all over me. That's when he shows up unannounced to my apartment, and he's carrying a huge duffel bag. I mean, huge and super heavy. And he tells me that his apartment flooded and that he didn't have anybody else to stay with, essentially asking me if he could stay at my place. I really didn't know if I should, but I thought, what's the worst that could happen? We already went on a date. I told him he could sleep on my couch, but that nothing would happen between us. He agreed and promised that he wouldn't try to make any moves on me. He comes in, puts his bag down, and just starts making dinner in my kitchen. He made soup and a beautiful salad. When I tried the soup, it tasted horrible. The first thing that ran through my mind was, oh my gosh, did he put something in this? But I couldn't believe that that would even be a possibility. We watched a movie and then I went to bed. I wake up to banging on my door at 2 a.m. Do you know how scary that is? He yells, I left my phone in there, I need to get it out. Then I realized, hold on a second, you didn't even come into my bedroom. First I pretended to be asleep just to not have to open, but then he kept banging louder. And then his voice got angry. He said, I know you're awake, just let me in. I finally said, sorry, I'm not gonna let you in, you're acting strange. Then he laughed and said, oh my gosh, stop being so dramatic, just let me in. But I did not. I didn't tell him, but I called the cops. Luckily, I lived 2 minutes away from the police station. He did not know this. I went into my bathroom and told the cops to come right away. For the next 2 minutes, he went silent. I pressed my ear to the door. I could hear him unzipping something, putting stuff down, and suddenly he starts banging on the door again. That's when the cops knock on my door and he goes to open. 10 seconds later, the cops knock on my door and tell me it's safe to come out. But the cop says, be prepared for what you're about to see. I open my door and there on my living room floor, there's a plastic tarp, knives, handcuffs, whips. Apparently this guy had been terrorizing women all around town. But fortunately, he had not unalived anybody. He would SA them and then tie them up and do things. But none of these women had reported him except for me. He went to prison and called me apologizing. Be careful out there. Story time about how my husband stole my dog because I told his family that he's gay. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My husband and I had been married for 6 months before I realized he was gay. The way I found out is horrendous. Husband, almost ex, he has a gardening business. This means he works with a lot of guys. The guys that he started hiring were all very young, very attractive. Obviously, I didn't care because I never thought that he would be gay. Well, I come home one day early from work, only to find him and 3 other guys on the couch, doing different things to each other. I was horrified. I was seriously triggered and traumatized. You see, I had been essayed by 2 boys when I was in college, so walking into this literally made me vomit. Even got flashbacks. What did my husband do? The man kicked me out of the house, closed the door on me. So I proceed to start ringing the doorbell. So I decide to call 911 and say that there's 2 intruders in my house, which I mean there are. By the time the police come, they're all dressed up. Of course, it was my word against theirs. The police told me that all I could do was get a divorce. At the time, I had a 2-month-old puppy. My husband didn't really like the puppy. He was a lot of work, but it was my responsibility. After I caught him, I ran straight to his mom's house and spilled the beans. His mom and dad were furious. They called him, but he wouldn't answer his phone. Called my sister and she told me that I should just go live with her. I go home to grab my things and my puppy, but my puppy is nowhere to be found. That's when my husband told me that he probably ran away. This man refused to help me look for him. I'm filing a divorce, but it's been a month since I saw my puppy, and I know the puppy's somewhere in the house. My husband doesn't let me back into the house though, and the cops were absolutely no use. I'm planning on breaking in. I mean, what should I do? Give me advice. My boyfriend kicked me out of my apartment at 3 a.m. Is this normal? Disclaimer, is not my story time. My boyfriend is extremely insecure. Let me start off by saying I have never cheated on him, but he accuses me of it every single day. If I go to the gym, if I go to the supermarket, doesn't matter where I go, he's always thinking that I'm trying to look for guys. A couple of days he accused me of it again. I showed him proof that I was at my mother's house. He got so angry that he started yelling at me. And he yelled for 2 hours. I'm not exaggerating. My neighbor knocked on her door and asked if I was okay. That's when my boyfriend pushed me out the door and locked me out. It was 3 a.m. My neighbor, who's my age, asked me to come over to my place and I said no. I needed to get back into my apartment, the apartment that I pay rent for. I knocked on the door for an hour and he still wouldn't open. By the way, I was just wearing a t-shirt. I had no shoes on, no phone. I finally knock on my neighbor's door and she lets me sleep in her place. An hour later, my boyfriend comes knocking on the door insisting that I come home. When I went back into my apartment, there was broken glass everywhere. Then he started apologizing for breaking my dishes, not for the fact that he kicked me out of my apartment at 3 a.m. You won't believe it, but things got even worse. I go to my bedroom and what do I see? Go to part 2. My boyfriend kicked me out of my apartment at 3 in the morning. Is that normal? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. He finally lets me back into my apartment. I see a bunch of broken dishes on the floor. He casually apologizes and tells me to go to bed. When I walk into my bedroom, my clothes were everywhere. Mind you, I have very expensive clothes. I have a lot of designer, Fenty, Gucci, and as I got closer to some of my dresses, I could see that he had taken scissors and cut them up. I couldn't believe it. He then flat out denied that he did that. He said that there must have been a demon in my apartment. I asked him to leave and he wouldn't. I just cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to a weird sound. Luckily, he had already left. He wrote me an apology letter and showed up to my apartment with breakfast 20 minutes later. That's when he said that he had never acted that way before and that he was sorry. But I was traumatized. I let him in with the breakfast. I kept hearing something in my closet. He told me to just ignore it. It was like a really weird noise, but it would stop and then start again. He told me that it must have been something in the walls. Then he told me that he believed me, that I wasn't cheating on him. I even told him that he should just turn on my location so he could see where I am at all times. I know this isn't normal, but guys do get jealous, right? Ended up working things out and he went to work. And he promised he wouldn't do it again. That little noise started up again in my closet. But when I opened my closet, I saw a robotic teddy bear. It had 2 bulging eyes and I had never seen it before. It was just moving around my closet making noise. When I picked it up, it was all wet. I called my boyfriend and asked him if he put it there. That's when he said, "No, I told you there's a demon in your apartment." He texted me later saying it was actually a gift for me. I don't know what to make of it. It's a weird looking bear. It turns on randomly and starts saying things like, "I love you." My boyfriend is on his best behavior though. He hasn't accused me of anything and we haven't fought in over a week. In fact, he's been bringing me lunch and bought me all the dishes that he broke. He even took me to Gucci to replace the dress he cut up. I haven't told my friends or family because I'm kind of embarrassed. Do you guys think this is normal? Am I the asshole for telling my boyfriend that he can't have girlfriends? I'm 22 and my boyfriend's 27. He's a finance bro. He comes from a rich, white, privileged family and always gets exactly what he wants, which included me. Grew up in a low-income household and my parents are immigrants. Family and I are really tight. Him and his family, on the other end, they barely speak to each other. Met at a party and he asked me out and I said yes. Before that, I had never hung out with anybody who had money, so him taking me out to dinners, his family's yacht, and on trips was an entirely different world for me. I quickly realized that it was always going to be his way. We always go eat where he wants to. We always hang out with whoever he wants to hang out with. Don't get me wrong, he is considerate and sweet and loving. We threw a party for his best friend's birthday on his yacht, and an old friend of his showed up to the party. This girl was just like him, rich, white, and got everything she wanted. But her and I actually did make friends that day. But then she started wanting to hang out with my boyfriend by themselves. He told me he was going to have breakfast with her and I asked him why he wouldn't take me. That's when he said that they just wanted to catch up. I told him it made me uncomfortable, but he went to breakfast anyway. He said we should have friends of the opposite sex. Should I break up with him? Just found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I met my boyfriend at the gym. Yeah, I know. Terrible idea. You can say it was lust at first sight. From the moment we saw each other at the gym, we couldn't take our eyes off each other. He came straight up to me at the gym and told me that he really liked me. But I was super shy. He was just some random guy I was meeting at the gym. But he was all about me. He asked me for my number and I said no. He asked me for my Instagram and I said no. For the next 2 weeks, he would come into the gym at exactly the same time I did. I would basically go work out whenever I had my lunch break. So of course, he would show up then. Of course, slowly but surely, he would charm me. He would even bring me lunch. After about 2 weeks, I finally gave him my phone number. That's when he asked me to go have breakfast, which I thought was weird. Should have been the first red flag, right? This was his excuse. He said he worked nights, but that his schedule would change all the time. So this meant that he would sometimes work during the day or at night. It was just random. So we went to breakfast. Here's the second red flag. He asked me if we could have breakfast 40 minutes away from where we lived. We both lived near the gym. Of course, I thought this was strange, but I said sure. He picked me up and the whole time at breakfast, he kept looking at his phone. Part 2 is up. I just found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. For our first date, we went to have breakfast 40 minutes away from where we both lived. Again, this was another red flag I ignored. During the breakfast, he was on his phone the entire time, and I called him out on it. I asked him why he invited me to breakfast if he was going to be on his phone all day. That's when he made up this whole sob story about how hard his work life was, how he was always stuck to his phone answering emails and text messages from his boss. And of course I believed it. I mean, I didn't know this guy from anything. After that, he put his phone down and I realized he was the most amazing man I had ever met. A man that can make me laugh is really important to me. And we laughed the entire time. We were telling each other jokes. We talked about family and values. We talked about our favorite foods, countries we wanted to go to, places we had been to. It was the perfect date. We even loved the same type of music, and our favorite movie was the same. So as you can imagine, I completely fell head over heels for this man. But the red flags continued. A week after our first date, he asked me to be his girlfriend. Did I say yes? Of course I did. But this was just another red flag. He began love bombing me and always wanted to be with me. But he never invited me over to his place. Part 3 is up. I just found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimer is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. Every time I'd ask to go over to his place, he would say no. First off, he told me that he had a terrible roommate, that his roommate was noisy and really dirty and the apartment stank. So for that reason, he didn't want me to come over. And of course I said, yeah, that's fine. Here's the fourth red flag that I ignored. He would ask to come over to my apartment at odd hours. Sometimes he wanted to come over at 3 in the morning. Sometimes he wanted to come over super early. And other times he wanted to come over really late. Because I have a 9-to-5 job, I kept saying no. I needed to get my beauty sleep, please. But even if I said no, he would still come over. Here's the fifth red flag. He would come over to my apartment and instantly fall asleep on the couch. I was always asking him why he was so tired, and he would just say that it was too much work. Well, we've been dating now for 2 months. A few days ago, I started getting suspicious of the situation, so I showed up to his apartment. But he didn't live there. It was an office building. I asked him to come over and I confronted him. That's when he confessed that he is married, and that he's been married for 10 years. But he says that his wife is a nightmare and that he wants to divorce her. What should I do? Story time about how my husband keeps borrowing money from me and now wants access to my accounts. What should I do? Disclaimer, it's not my story time. Send me on Instagram. When I confronted him about buying a $600 watch with my money, he told me that he has every single right to use my money as much as I do. And even though I'm the one earning the money, he is my husband, so he can do whatever he wants with it. I got so angry, I picked up one of my crystals and threw it right at his head. Luckily, it missed him, but it did scratch his ear. He went berserk and accused me of trying to kill him. He ran over to the ER with a scratch on his ear. I went straight to my parents' house and I told them what was happening. Obviously, my parents agree with me that he should not be spending $600 of my money on a stupid watch. And they told me to take away any access he had to my money. So I took away my debit card and my credit card from him. We both ended up apologizing to each other, so for a few months, it was okay. He had a few jobs, so he had some spending money for himself. But then he got fired again. That's when he asked me politely to add him to my bank account so that he could get his own debit card from my account. To be honest, at first I thought it was okay, but I didn't say yes or no. I called my parents and they told me absolutely not. And when I told my husband, he threatened to divorce me. He says that I'm neglecting his needs. Part 3 is a story time about how my husband keeps borrowing money from me and now wants access to my bank accounts. Disclaimer is not my story time. It's on me on Instagram. That's when he threatened to divorce me because I wouldn't give him access to my checking account. He said that I was neglecting him. That's when he told me that if the tables were turned, he would be expected to give me money. And you know what? Totally true. At the same time, I can't allow him to just buy $600 watches. He then made a promise to me that he would only use the money for necessities. So for example, paying bills or anything like that. Although we already have our bills on auto pay, so I'm not sure how that would work. So I took him to the bank and I added him to my account. I know you all must think I'm so stupid right now. And you know what? I am. 2 days later after he got his debit card, I checked his bank account and he had signed up to 3 different OnlyFans accounts. That's a total of $50 a month coming out of my paycheck plus all the things that he buys on the website. I confronted him again and he told me that it was just for fun. And that because I'm at work and he's home alone, he needs something to entertain himself with. Then he told me that if he didn't have the OnlyFans accounts, he would probably end up just cheating on me. And then he asked me, what do you prefer, me watching stuff online or me actually going out and finding women? This is where I need your help. I see his point, but I'm not sure if this is like manipulation or something. He really seems so genuine and he's always doing my laundry, cooking, and cleaning up for me. Even rubs my feet when I get home from work. And I haven't told my parents about this. I think they'll hit the roof. Should I let him have access to OnlyFans and use my money? Or should I put a stop to it and risk him cheating? What should I do? Story time about how my husband keeps borrowing money from me and now wants access to my bank accounts. What should I do? Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's on my Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 6 years. When we first got married, we were really young, so we were living with our parents. We didn't actually move out from my parents' house up until 2 years ago. In fact, I don't think we're actually adults yet. We both still act like we're teenagers. I'm 24 and he's 25. I recently got myself a really good job. He, on the other hand, has never had a really good job. He does a lot of odd jobs here and there, a lot of catering. He also models because he's extremely good looking. So now that I got myself a job, I wanted to get my own apartment. But of course, I have to include my husband because we're married. He actually ended up getting an okay job. We decided to split the rent and everything was going fine. But then he got laid off and this is when things started going bad. He started asking me for money because he wasn't getting paid anymore. Every now and then he would ask me for like $10 or he would ask me for my debit card. At first, it was just small purchases like going to the supermarket or going to Starbucks. So I gave him my card. One day I'm checking my bank account and I realized that he bought himself a $600 watch. You'll never guess what he said when I confronted him. Part 2 is walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. My boyfriend moved in with his gay best friend 6 months ago. Here's a little backstory. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost 2 years. My boyfriend is a social butterfly. He has 1,000,001 friends. I got used to this very quickly because most of them were female and a lot of them were gay. They actually became my friends too in some cases. Early on in the relationship, I met one of his best friends. Let's call him Tim. Tim is very, very gay. And he doesn't hide the fact that he thinks my boyfriend is very attractive. I asked my boyfriend if Tim ever made him feel uncomfortable, and he said no. But here's the thing. Tim sometimes says the most outlandish things about my boyfriend. Yeah, my boyfriend is hot. He's super fit, has a great face, so Timmy loves to comment on his body all the time. On several occasions, he's made really dirty jokes about my boyfriend's butt and the things that he'd like to do to my boyfriend's butt. Every time they go out, he's always trying to get my boyfriend drunk. And when he succeeds, he always takes off his shirt. So then my boyfriend spends the rest of the night shirtless. Obviously, this bothered me, but it didn't bother me enough to ever be concerned. Boy, was I wrong. A few weeks ago, Timmy threw a party and told my boyfriend not to invite me. I got really upset, so I showed up anyway. Timmy was trying to kiss my boyfriend. Part 2 is up. Walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. I instantly knew the only reason I didn't get invited to the party was so that Tim could try to get with my boyfriend. But here's the thing. My boyfriend had so much patience for Timmy. Even though Timmy would make such perverted jokes about my boyfriend would laugh it off and tell me it wasn't a big deal. But I knew it did make him uncomfortable. But of course, I show up to the party anyway. When I got there, I found Timmy sitting on the couch with my boyfriend. My boyfriend was clearly drunk. And Timmy was trying to kiss his neck. As soon as Timmy saw me, he got up from the couch and asked me what I was doing there. He said that it was a boys only party. When I looked around, it actually was. There were no other women there. I told Timmy that I was going to take my boyfriend home and he said that I was overreacting and that my boyfriend was just having fun. I walk up to my boyfriend and he is so drunk, he doesn't even recognize me. I grabbed him and got him out of there. The next day, I told my boyfriend that Timmy was trying to kiss him when he was drunk. But of course, my boyfriend defended him. And my boyfriend confessed to me that he knows Timmy has a crush on him and that he's basically his best friend out of pity. Then my boyfriend actually told me I needed to stop being a bitch to Timmy. Part 3 is up. Walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. That's when my boyfriend basically told me I needed to stop being a bitch to Tim. I decided to ghost my boyfriend for 2 days because I was so upset at him. But here's the thing, my boyfriend was ghosting me too. So I decided to go over to his apartment because I hadn't heard from him in 24 hours. My boyfriend had given me a key to his apartment, by the way. But before I put in the key to unlock the door, I hear moaning sounds coming from inside. I instantly knew what was happening. Quickly unlocked the door and find my boyfriend getting banged on the couch by his gay best friend. It's an image I can never forget. I'm actually traumatized. They separate and my boyfriend comes running over to me. First thing out of his mouth was, "We were just experimenting, it's not a big deal." He thought I was gonna be like, "Oh, cool." I look over at Timmy and he's on the couch smiling. I couldn't help myself and I slapped my boyfriend really hard. I ran away and didn't talk to him for 2 days. He finally came over to my apartment after those 2 days and explained that it was just something experimental. And he swears that they've never done it before and that they never will again. I took him back, but I don't trust him. He says that Timmy will always be his best friend and that I shouldn't get jealous. What should I do? Story time about how my boyfriend's best friend kissed me. Should I tell him? And she's a girl. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's not even on Instagram. She promised she wouldn't try to kiss me again, but she lied. Just a few days later, my boyfriend had forgiven her. She made up a whole story to him that she was depressed about another girl and that somehow I reminded her of the other girl. Then my boyfriend said, "Do you mind if she comes over?" And I told him as long as she didn't try to touch me, everything would be fine. This time I was going to defend myself. Do you see where this is going? A few of my boyfriend's friends showed up and then she showed up last. And as soon as she saw me, she came over and tried to hug me. I told her hugging was not necessary for an apology, that her words were fine. She then apologizes. Not 2 hours later, while everyone is in the backyard, I go to the kitchen. And she follows me again. This time she kissed me, but it was much quicker and I didn't have to push her off. Then she said, "What, are you gonna run and tell your boyfriend again?" Instead, I smacked her. Really hard. So hard, you could see my palm print on her face. Then she apologized and begged me not to tell my boyfriend. He's afraid of losing his friendship. And I actually did feel bad for her for a second, but I'm not sure anymore. Should I tell my boyfriend or should I keep this to myself? Bye. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimers is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. The bitch that used to be my best friend, yeah, she's the worst person in the entire world. By the time I met her, my boyfriend and I had already been going out for 6 months. I met her through some friends and her and I got along really well. She was wild and crazy and she brought that wild and crazy side out of me. And at the time it was something that I did need, but I didn't realize just how wild she was. Let me tell you what this girl was like. She was the type of girl that would try to bring up sex in every conversation. Like, no matter who we were talking to, she would always bring up sex. She would always try to impress everyone about how much she knew about it and how much she needed sex all the time. And sometimes I would ask her to not talk about it so much, and her response to that was, "Stop being such a prudy bitch." My boyfriend and I decided to have all our friends over at my apartment for dinner. Since I had just met her, I decided to invite her over. This was the first time she was meeting my boyfriend and all of my friends. And of course, she proceeded to monopolize the entire conversation all night, and all she talked about was sex. Then she went to the bathroom and took off her jacket. She came out in her bra and shorts. Part 2 is a story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. That's when she came out of the bathroom in her bra and a pair of shorts. Mind you, we have a bunch of our friends over having dinner at my place. I get up from the table and I ask her what's up. That's when she says that it's way too hot in my apartment and that I needed to turn down the temperature. I told her I'd give her a t-shirt if she wanted to, and she said no. I'm comfortable in my body and I don't care if people look at me. When I look around, I see everyone staring at her. Obviously, all the guys are like oogling her goodies, but all the girls that are there with their guys are instantly upset. That's when my boyfriend bursts out laughing and says, "What's wrong with her?" She just starts laughing maniacally at what my boyfriend said. Then she goes and sits down next to my boyfriend and starts joking with him. You might be thinking I'm so stupid for this, but I decided to let it go. Oh yeah, she's also the type of person that never wants to go home. That's when I had to be honest with her and I told her that she was making everyone uncomfortable. And I asked her to leave, which she did. A few days later, she comes over to my place so that we can get ready to go out. My boyfriend was gonna go out with his friends and I was gonna go out with her. 2 seconds after she comes into my apartment, she walks out of the bathroom completely naked. And my boyfriend's just sitting there on the couch watching her. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's something on Instagram. That's when she comes out completely naked. You could see everything. Boobs, butt, and V. And my boyfriend is sitting on the couch. As she comes out of the bathroom, his jaw drops to the floor. Then she says to me, "Oh my god, I couldn't find a towel, sorry." She walks straight into the guest bedroom where she has her clothes. My boyfriend and I look at each other and I'm completely disgusted. He, on the other hand, thought it was hilarious, so he starts laughing. Then she comes out of the guest bedroom in panties and a bra. I mean, I guess at least she wasn't naked this time. That's when I tell her, "Do you need help getting dressed or something?" She says, "Oh no, girl, I'm just thirsty. I'm gonna get something to drink." So I said to her, "I'll get you something to drink. You can go get dressed." At this point, I had it. But guess what? This wasn't the last time. A few weeks later, I wanted to go to her place to get ready this time. But then she insisted on coming over to mine instead. That's when I got the feeling that she had done all of that to get my boyfriend's attention. And I straight up told her, "Are you just walking around naked at my place just because you want my boyfriend to see you?" Of course, she denied it. She says, "He's cute, but he's not that cute." What? Part 4 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. At this point, she had been naked in front of my boyfriend twice, but it wasn't the last time. She came over to pick me up one time and I told her to wait for me downstairs. Well, instead of waiting for me downstairs, she decided to come up to my apartment. While I was in the bedroom changing, my boyfriend let her in. That's when she comes straight into my bedroom without even knocking and says, "Hey girl, do you have a dress I can wear?" The dress she was wearing was absolutely perfect. I asked her why and she said that she didn't feel sexy enough. Without even me saying yes, she started raiding my closet. Then she pulls out a very expensive dress I had not even put on yet. My boyfriend was standing in the doorway just watching the whole thing go down. I look at my boyfriend and he just rolls his eyes at me. Then out of nowhere, she takes off her dress and she's completely naked underneath. She looks at my boyfriend and says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see there." My boyfriend turned around and walked away. I finally closed the door and confronted her about it. She told me that I'm a prude and that I needed to relax. I kicked her out and we haven't spoken since. She's been begging to talk to me and hang out. My boyfriend told me that if I felt uncomfortable around her, then for her not to come over. But he says that he's fine with her. His reaction also upset me too. What should I do? Story time about how my stepdad caught me sending nudes to my stepbrother. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. I'm 17 going on 18. This is like a roller coaster, so you better strap in. I met my stepbrother 3 years ago. He was a new guy at our school. From the moment we set eyes on each other, it was like love at first sight. But my best friend expressed that she liked him first. There was no way I was gonna step on her toes. But he had no interest in her, at least not at the beginning. One day, my bestie and I go to a party, and my stepbrother was there. My best friend is gutsy. This girl went up to him and said, "I like you." And then she kissed him. He was shook. For the rest of the night, they danced and kissed. I, of course, was happy for her, but to be honest, I did feel a little bit of jealousy. So I decided to hook up with somebody else. Now, my best friend has a lot of insecurities, and she has an ED. My stepbrother found out about this and felt bad for her. So he decided to ask her to be his girlfriend, which looking back was really nice of him, but it really messed with her mental health. So essentially, he started hanging out with us all the time. So I had to pretend I hated him in order to not show that I actually loved him. And one night, I kissed him. Part 2 is